What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was trapped in a forbidden cave with girls? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. It was a bright sunny day in Konoha. Peace reigned throughout the land. But however in one back alley the citizens were especially happy. They were beating the crap out of a poor defenseless 5-year-old. Said child was on the brink of death when the good civilians stopped hurting him. A masked figure parted the crowd and approached Naruto. He stooped down and asked if he was alright. Naruto was happy the cat-masked Anbu had saved his life. I think I'm okay, arigato Anbu-san. The man sneered behind his mask and kicked the poor child in the ribs repeatedly. Wrong answer, demon brat. Naruto started to cough up blood when the Anbu stopped kicking him and knelt down to pretend like he was checking the profusely bleeding boy for injuries. Suddenly a familiar voice cut over the crowd. What's going on here? Everyone looked up to see the Sandaime Hokage on a nearby rooftop. Surrounding him was an envoy of elite ninjas. The Junin were forced to hide their emotions. The Anbu hid their sneers. Some even grinned at the sight of the bloodied demon. Thought most were disappointed he was still alive, or that they didn't get to participate. In fact, if the Hokage wasn't there, they would have joined the attack. The old man jumped down and picked up the near-death boy. Tears started to roll down his cheeks and the cat-masked Anbu gave his report. Hokage-sama, the boy has received many cuts and bruises along with 15 broken bones. I was unable to stop the attack. Naruto tried to open his mouth to speak but failed and instead opted for a grin and then passed into the bliss that was unconsciousness. Thank you, would you wait here a second? No problem Hokage-sama. The Hokage nodded towards the crowd, and the Anbu surrounded the crowd and began handcuffing civilians. The Hokage motioned for a young Junin to hold Naruto for a second, which he did reluctantly. Sighing, the old man disappeared from view, only to reappear in front of the cat-masked Anbu. Sending a chakra-infused punch to the man's gut, he was sent shooting into a wall. It was a little-known fact that Sarutobi was just about as strong as Tsunade in his prime, after all she had to learn from somewhere. He wasn't as strong as he was decades ago, but he was still quite a force to be reckoned with. Retrieving Naruto from the gawking Junin, he teleported to the hospital. Bolting upright, a young Naruto woke up in the hospital. The pain of his sudden movement brought him back down. Wincing he looked around the room and saw a sleeping cage in one of the neighboring chairs. He whispered, Oji-san. Seeing no reaction he whispered louder, Oji-san. His chest erupted in pain from speaking and wincing again he looked back at the rousing Hokage. Lifting his sleepy eyes to Naruto, he yawned and replied, Naruto, go back to sleep, you need your rest. With that the Hokage went back to sleep. Naruto grinned and muttered, thanks Oji-san. Left to his own thoughts, Naruto thought over his memories. Tears formed in his eyes as he remembered the looks he received from everyone in Konoha, the looks of hatred and rage, the threats and his nickname, the demon brat. He always wondered why they called him that, but he would think about that later. He remembered why he was in the hospital. It was because he had tried to make just one friend, it always resulted like this. He thought back to a particular memory that stressed this. Flashback. Naruto was walking down the street last year to the marketplace. As he got there he noticed one of the vendors sending glares to a purple-haired teen who was buying her vegetables. As the girl picked up a few tomatoes the old woman spat on them and told her, "Snake bitch, get away from my store." Naruto was really upset at this. The girl had done nothing wrong, but the mean woman had told her to leave. He knew that if he got involved, he would get in trouble, but as he was starting to walk away, his big heart urged him to help the girl. Walking up to the lady he pulled on her sleeve a little. "Hey Anyo, but I think it would be a good idea if you apologized to that girl." The lady turned around only to shriek out, "Help me, the demon is attacking me. Someone help me." A young man nearby heard her distress ran over and began punching the boy in the gut. Unable to defend himself, Naruto could only absorb the blows. After a while a patrolling Anbu came upon the scene. The young man seeing him ran away, knowing that the ninja reported to the Hokage, and he knew what happened to those that hurt the demon brat. Naruto also raced out of there, and in a few minutes ran into the purple-haired teen. Stumbling for the right words the young boy spoke in his cheery voice. "Hi, my name's Naruto, you wanna be FR?" He was unable to continue because Anko had punched him in the gut. Eyes wide in shock, Naruto could only watch as she slapped him hard then kneed him in the stomach. He struggled to his feet only to see her finish her hand. Seals and snakes came rushing at him. Trying to run away, he was stopped when 4 snakes bit down into his arm. Cradling his bleeding limb, he tried to run away but she appeared in front of him and grabbed his collar. Slamming him up against a wall, she stabbed a kunai into his gut. Yelling in pain, Naruto was thrown into a nearby trash can. Sneering, she grabbed the trash can lid and spat on his head. Demon! Fighting back tears, he could only watch as she slammed the lid on and walked away. Crying softly, he tried to get out but couldn't. She had put a seal on the trash can so it wouldn't open from the inside. 2 days later, the Hokage found him near starved to death and asked him who did this. Lying, he said he hadn't seen who the attacker was. Even though she had beaten him and nearly killed him, he didn't rat her out. He considered her a friend because she had not hurt him as much as some others did. Flashback. Tears falling freely down his face, he cried himself to sleep. After several days, Naruto was discharged, rather happily, from the hospital. Soon he made it back home to the orphanage. He trudged up the stairs and collapsed on his bed. After a nap, he woke up and went out of his room and looked out his favorite window on the 3rd floor. He gazed outside and saw a group of boys playing soccer outside. Laughing together and joking, the group of friends had fun. Tears started forming in his eyes as he watched them play and live the life he longed to have. A week later, he hid behind one of the bushes surrounding the orphanage and looked out. Normally, he was not permitted to leave his room when there were visitors. However, this was special, as one of the boys was getting adopted today. Adopted, how great word that was to Naruto. It was one of the things he dreamed about, running up to his mother and father and getting hugged. He always wondered why Oji-san never adopted him. He always praised him and was nice, but when asked about adoption, he always changed the topic. Little did Naruto know, but the reason he was still unadopted was because the council had forbid the Hokage of taking care of the boy. He was a dangerous demon after all, and it could just be a trick and the boy was really trying to kill the kind leader. Now depressed, Naruto decided to visit the old man. He always cheered him up when he was down. Walking up to the front door of the Hokage tower, Naruto was glared at by the Anbu guards. They had heard about what happened to their comrade that had been tricked by the demon and punished for doing nothing by the Hokage. Of course this wasn't the real story, but who would create rumors supporting the demon? Snarling one escorted him up to the secretary then went back down, mumbling about demons. Taking a glance at Naruto, the secretary reluctantly pushed the calm button to the Hokage's office. "Hello Hokage-sama, the child is here to see you." "Thank you, please send him in." Naruto opened the door and looked to see the Hokage looking up from his paperwork. Sighing, he sat in one of the chairs and mumbled a sad, "Hi Oji-san." The Hokage's heart went out to the boy and got out of his chair and gave him a hug. It was with that Naruto broke down and began sobbing. Why does no one want me? Why Oji-san, why? I'd be better off if I was dead. As much as the Hokage wanted to help, he knew he couldn't. All he could do was comfort him and give him hope. He had talked to the case cage and was shocked to hear about their problem with their resident monster. The boy had been told what he was and was always alone. The Hokage refused to let this happen to Naruto, so he was always there for him. But he still couldn't really help him, as there were several main reasons. The first was a given: civil war. If he officially sided with Naruto, instead of helping more from the sidelines, the civilians and ninjas loyal to him would fight against the haters and enemies of the boy. It seemed all he could do was make the law that if one hurts the child there may be the possibility the demon could become angry. Of course he had to put it in terms the haters could understand, but all he wanted was Naruto's safety. He was also just too old to be any sort of father figure for Naruto. He wasn't stupid, he knew he had little time on Earth left, and he didn't want Naruto to get even more upset over his death, traumatized from the disappearance of his only father figure. Someday Naruto, someday someone will accept you, and you will get friends. You are just too good for anyone in the village. Naruto sniffled and weakly replied, "Really?" The Hokage smiled at him, "Really?" After seeing Naruto's now cheerful face leave his office, the old man sat down in his chair and sighed. Looking over at the portrait of the fourth, he looked down to the ground in shame. He remembered the man's last words, "Sarutobi," This boy is a hero. He remembered how the late Hokage had died right after he said it. Sighing again, he spoke. I'm so sorry Arashi, I'm so sorry. Smiling, Naruto ran all the way back to the orphanage, with only a few mishaps on the way. Receiving the normal glares and insults from several mothers, valiantly defending their innocent children from the horrible demon, after their children had bullied Naruto and stolen his candy he had picked up in the Hokage's office. As he ran up the orphanage's steps, he ran into the person he wanted to run into the most, Nami, his sister. Though they weren't biological brother and sister, they considered themselves family. Although she was the same age as him, she acted much younger and less mature than Naruto, whereas he had to mature faster after living through his early childhood. Nami was about the same size as Naruto, with soft brown eyes and brown hair. She was wearing a rather cheap kimono which barely reached her knees. She squealed when she noticed who had bumped into her, Naruto-kun. Hi Nami-chan, hey, follow me. The two raced up the stairs to his room. Well, if you can call it that, it was just a cleaning closet cleaned out, but it still reeked of chemicals, though after years of living in it, you got used to it. He locked the door and raced over to Nami. Guess what Oji-san told me today? Eager she happily replied. What did he say to you? I'm not telling. Nani. Please tell me Naruto-kun, please please please. Grinning he taunted her more, no, I'm not telling you. Looking downcast, Nami's brown hair blocked her eyes. Ready to tease her some more, Naruto opened his mouth, but when he looked back at her he was shocked. Nami had played her trump card, the puppy dog face. Won't you tell Whittle me what the old man said, please? Unable to reply in the negative, Naruto accepted defeat. Well, Oji-san told me that one day, someone would accept me. Baka, Oji-san and I already accept you. With that she bonked him on the head and resumed listening to the story. Resuming his story he told her the greatest news she had ever heard. And then he said he had a surprise for me. Flashback. Still looking sad, Naruto sat in his chair looking at the floor. The Hokage gave him some candy, but that still didn't make him happy. The old man decided to drop the bombshell he had been saving for Naruto's birthday. Naruto, what are some of your dreams again? Looking up, Naruto saw the Hokage was serious. Well, I want to be Hokage, just like you Oji-san. I want to be Hokage because everyone likes you, so maybe they will all like me if I'm Hokage. The Hokage nodded, it made sense. The thing the child needed desperately was attention and acknowledgement. Well Naruto, what if I told you that soon you will be going on your first steps down that path? What do you mean Oji-san? I can't go to the academy, you need a guardian to get there. So you need a guardian, the Hokage mused. Why doesn't the caretaker act as your guardian? Several other orphans attend there. Naruto looked down at the ground. Well, she doesn't like me, she said I'm just a monster. Naruto started crying again. The Hokage sighed and hugged the boy tightly, feeling his robes starting to get wet from the boy's tears. After a while the boy calmed down and sat down sadly, in his head, bad memories repeating like a broken record. Well, Naruto, guess what? What Oji-san? I have signed you up for next year's class. But I don't have a guardian. New tears began to well up in his eyes and the Hokage leaned close and whispered in his ear. Yes you do Baka. You're looking at him. Stunned Naruto sat down unable to react. Finally he launched himself out of the chair at speeds that would put the Yondaime to shame. Nearly breaking every bone in the old mont's body, Naruto gave him a great bear hug. Painfully, the Hokage returned the hug. Naruto never wanted the hug to end, but the voice of the secretary washed over the room. Hokage-sama, Hyuga Hiyashi is here to see you. With that, Naruto was forced to leave and sprinted out of the tower to go see Nami. Flashback. I'm gonna get to be a ninja now, isn't it awesome? That's so awesome. Giving the poor boy his own bone-crushing hug. Today was a good day for our blonde hero, so far he had only received glares. Yet, inside he was panicking. In 2 days was his birthday. Unlike other children's birthdays filled with happiness and joy, his birthday was only sadness and pain. Where other children got presents and birthday cake, he got broken bones and bruises. His answer to the problem was locking himself in his room all day, not even venturing outside to get food. It was even unsafe to go to the bathroom, and it involved him utilizing all his stealth ability. Heading back to the orphanage after buying groceries with what little precious money he earned by physically hurting himself in public, He could care less about the ethics and more about the money. The crowd especially liked it when he bled. So packing all the food he could eat in a day, he warned Nami to stay away from his room. She was confused as always. He never explained why to stay away. Shrugging, he made a mental checklist to see if he had everything. He shivered when he remembered his 5th birthday. The crowd had caught him outside that day, and it was one of his worst memories. He remembered he had to spend a week at the hospital instead of his normal 2 or 3 days. Praying to whatever god listening that his next birthday would be a painless one, he fell asleep. 2 days later, Naruto was trying to avoid in and all contact with the villagers of Konoha. The caretaker of the orphanage had somehow fallen ill and required one of the children to go to the drugstore to pick up the medicine. For some reason, the caretaker had picked him for the task, and when he tried to refuse, he had been slapped in the face and had his meal privileges taken away. Reluctantly, he had left the orphanage without any money. The caretaker had told him he would have to buy it with his own money, as she was so incredibly poor. That was not the case at all. The woman received loads of money each week from the village's funds for taking care of the orphan population, but she used that money for herself. Seeing the blonde departing, the caretaker got up from the bed and miraculously got better in seconds. Heading towards the nearest phone with a wicked grin on her face, it was time to alert the masses that the demon was on the loose and had threatened her. He had also rudely refused to help the poor old woman by going on a simple run to the store. Grinning, she dialed the Inuzuka complex. Digging into his near-empty pockets, he discovered he had enough for the medicine and had a little spending money. Remembering he had been unable to get Nami a gift for her birthday, he decided to stop at the flower store. It was on his way anyway. Walking up to the front door, he panicked when he heard the bell going off. In a few seconds, a blonde girl walked up. "Hello, and welcome to Konoha's finest flower shop. What would you like?" Sighing, she trudged over to her pink-haired friend and spoke over her back. "Go ahead, a look around, I guess. Come get me when you find something you like." Naruto nodded and looked around the store, staying away from the windows as much as possible. He kept giving occasional glances to the two friends, feeling the same pangs in his heart as always. Sighing, he looked at some flower that appeared to have some unpronounceable name and decided to go over to the other blonde girl. As he approached, he heard the pink-haired one squeal and point to a flower. Ino, what kind of flower is that? It's so beautiful." "Geez, Sakura, I would have thought that since you came in here so much you would know that one by now. It's a sunflower and they are really common around here, so they are cheap. And I thought you were supposed to be the smart one." The girl named Sakura was silent for a moment before exploding. "Ino pig, I could care less about your stupid flowers. Why would I care about some stupid flower when I can go pick them outside for free?" Ino's eye twitched and she released an equally loud, "You dare insult my family business? I oughta kick your butt for that." Forehead girl. Naruto's gaze drifted over to Sakura and noticed that she did indeed possess a huge forehead. Taking all his self-control not to smile, he continued to watch the conversation and then watched them exchange insult after insult. Eventually he grew bored and looked up at the flower. It was really cool, it looked like his hair, and it was one he could actually pronounce. Digging into his pocket, he found more than enough cash to pay for the flower. Using his better judgment not to get involved in the argument, he sat at the sidelines and watched. It was like a tennis match. One girl would fire off a vicious insult, and then the other would yell out one even more horrible. Suddenly the pink-haired one crossed the line on the other one's patience when she called a stupid dumb bond. "Why don't you shove one of the stupid flowers up your ass?" Remembering the boy, who was currently chibified from the vicious insults, turned an emotional 180. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean you. I meant the bitch right next to me." Well, I think this was when Naruto had had enough and coughed to get the girl's attention. "Gomen, but I would like to buy one of your sunflowers, please." Putting on one of his famous grins, he handed her the coins. Ino blinked and looked at him, then swiped the money faster than he could blink. Turning her back and counting the coins, she made sure he had enough. Since she was working, she received all the money made on her shift, and a girl has to have lots of cash if she wants to look good. Turning back to Naruto, she smiled and handed him a sunflower. "Arigato for shopping at Yamanaka's flower shop. We hope to see you again." Walking out of the store, he had barely taken 2 steps before he heard their 2 voices explode out of the store. Seconds later, all the glass in the windows shattered, and he bolted out of there. The villagers would probably think he had done it. Back at the store, the two girls were deeply apologizing to a very mad Inoshi. Gomen 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 Gomen. Inoshi signed and used the 1 to 10 trick to relieve him of his anger. Ino, seeing her father had calmed down, desperately tried to change the situation. "Oh, guess what, we had a customer just come in." "Really, what did she buy?" "Oh, it wasn't a woman, it was a blonde boy our age, and he bought a sunflower." Blonde boy, racking his mind trying to remember who could fit the description. He came only with one conclusion: there were only a handful of blondes in Konoha, and they all belonged to the Yamanaka family, except the Yondaime. It was something like a bloodline. Each Yamanaka possessed blonde hair. "Anyo, can you describe the boy?" "He had really blue eyes, he was kinda cute." Inishi's eyebrow twitched. It seemed like every guy his daughter ran into was cute, or handsome, or hot. He was relieved that his daughter wasn't like the obsessive Sakura, but if she was like that he would have to kill himself from shame. "Can you describe anything else about the boy?" Sakura spoke up. "He had some weird things on his cheeks, and they looked like whiskers or something." Inoshi paled when the girls mentioned the marks. Ino, curious about why her father was acting strange, asked, "Dad, what's so bad about that boy?" Nearly exploding like his daughter had done a second ago, he used all his self-control not to slap her, but he knew it wasn't her fault. She had no knowledge that there was a terrible demon running around loose. Because he had dem. Thinking hard, Inoshi tried to come up with something equally as frightening: serial killer. He visits flower shops and steals all their money and kills little girls for fun. "Did he do anything strange to you?" Ino thought back. The boy had looked over his shoulder at them and stared. Terrified now of the little girl killing monster who robs flower stores, the girls stared in the direction he left. Of course, neither suspected Inoshi of lying. Why would he lie about something like that? Stopping, he got up and got some water from a fountain, then sat down on the bench and looked at the flower. He could imagine Nami's face when she saw it. Fully rested, he jumped off the bench and went sprinting back to the orphanage. As he turned a corner, he accidentally tackled someone to the ground. Terrified of the consequences, he hurriedly picked up the girl and asked if she was all right. When he saw her face, he knew he was royally screwed. She was Hyuga and she looked important looking, though all the Hyuga looked important. Shutting his eyes, he waited for her to kill him, but after a few seconds he opened one eye. She was just trying to get rid of the dust on her new kimono. Think of something to say so he get away. He was shocked when the girl spoke up. No, it's OOKR really. Gomen for R running into YU." Naruto blinked and gave her his most intelligent answer, "Huh?" The Hyuga bowed and looked at the ground. Thinking hard, he tried to remember what that strange guy had said. Flashback. A young Naruto knocked on the Hokage's door. When it opened, he found he was not alone with the Hokage. In one of the corners was a man with extremely spiky white hair and a lot of scrolls on his back. Biting into an apple, the strange man glanced at the boy, then back to the Sandaime. "So this is the kid? Looks just like a chibi version of Arashi, though I expected this." The guy was of course so egotistical that he would just have to seal in someone who looked just like him. Naruto was confused. He looked like someone, and they had done something to him? Looking up from his apple, the man asked him a question. "Hey kid, have you ever heard of Jiraiya?" Moving his head in the negative, the man's face fell. "Sensei, how could you not tell him about me?" The Hokage shrugged. "I guess the thought never crossed my mind." "Oji-san, is this guy Tsunade and Orochimaru's teammate?" "Sensei, how could you? I'm gonna kick your SCRWNY old ass if you don't tell him how great I am." The other two people in the room sweat dropped. Sarutobi cleared his throat and looked over to Naruto. "This is my student Jiraiya. He is very powerful." Naruto thought how he must be if he was able to threaten the Hokage and get away with it. He likes to summon toads, and that's it really. Ready to kill the Hokage, he noticed the Anbu guards had started reaching for their swords. Deciding to forgive his sensei for the moment, he turned his attention to the little boy. "So kid, are you the same kind of playboy with the ladies that Arashi was?" Naruto thought hard. What the hell was a playboy? Suddenly he remembered. "Oh, you mean those magazines I find in Oji-san's desk?" Jiraiya grew his perverted grin. Maybe now he could have his revenge. "Sensei, I thought you swore to Tsunade that you would stay off the perverted stuff?" The Hokage blushed. "Hypocrite. Anyway, don't we have anything else to talk about?" "So anyway, brat, how many girls have you picked up?" Naruto thought, he was able to pick up Nami and carry her around, he was pretty fit for a 5-year-old. Naruto proudly boasted, "One so far." Jiraiya's eyebrows shot up. "How long have you been seeing her?" "For several years." "Geez, sensei, this kid picked PA girl at 3 years old?" Jiraiya proudly stuck out his chest. "Still, that nothing. I picked up a girl when I was 2. The Hokage sighed, "Of course you did. Anyway brat, I'm gonna give you some advice on women. First of all, wait, let me get out my diagrams." The perverted man pulled out the many 3D models and posters, all with pictures of the female body. The Hokage raced over and covered Naruto's eyes before he was able to see them. Blushing furiously and having a massive nosebleed, the old man threw a paperweight that hit Jiraiya right in the face. Rubbing his sore cheek, Jiraiya muttered, "My genius is wasted on this village. If I taught him this now, he would thank me for it in a few years." Tears formed in his eyes as he imagined a young Naruto having ladies on each arm. "Thank you so much, Jiraiya-sensei. Without you I would have never been able to pick up women so easily. As thanks, have this huge amount of cash, and these 2 girls." Then the girls would come over and thank him. As Jiraiya was daydreaming, the Hokage had used a Kaiden jutsu, a bit reluctantly, to burn all of Jiraiya's posters and magazines. When Jiraiya came back to reality, he saw the face of a confused little boy and a very pissed off Hokage. "Jiraiya, could you give him some advice acceptable for 5-year-olds?" Jiraiya rubbed the back of his neck. "Well kid, girls like." Receiving a preemptive glare from the old man, he shivered. "Flowers, yeah, they like flowers." Naruto groaned. Why would he care about girls? All they did was talk and slap him and bitch about everything. Sighing, he raced out of the Hokage's office. Flashback. Now using this info to attempt to make fiends with the girl, against his better judgment, already knowing that this would result in pain, he put on his happiest and fakest grin and gave her the flower. "Hi, my name is Naruto, would you?" "Hinata-sama." The girl turned around to see a branch member come running up to her and the kind boy. Panting, the man was shocked when he saw who Hinata was with. Grabbing her arm and backing up slowly, he backed up right into the most arrogant person in Konoha, Hyuga Hiyashi. "What is going on here?" Stuttering, the poor branch member failed to answer. "Pathetic fool, I can't trust my daughter's life to you." Incompetence. Making the seal to activate the mark on the poor man's forehead, the branch member fell down to the ground screaming. Both children were in shock. Naruto was speechless. Hinata rushed up to her father and begged him to stop. Hiyashi turned around to her and backhanded her, sending her a few inches in the air and falling a few feet away. "Pathetic excuse for a daughter, why must you be so weak? Do you not realize that flour could have had poison in it, that he could have killed you easily? You are useless to the Hyuga clan, I don't know why I let you live." Growling, Naruto had had enough of the head Hyuga. Looking at the body of the dead branch member, he snarled and leapt at him. Smirking, Hiyashi caught him by the hair in midair and palmed him in the stomach, sending him flying into a wall. Hiyashi knew the dire consequences of killing the boy. Your entire clan was executed, and their style of killing was too obvious. The last thing Naruto saw was him crushing the flower and Hinata crying, then he fell unconscious. Waking up several hours later, Naruto found himself slouched against a wall, a large dent right above him. Checking his pockets to make sure he still had the medicine, he slowly got up. He had a huge stomach ache, but he knew he had to make it back before the actual festival started. Trudging along, he managed to make it halfway there, before he found himself in front of a mob of angry citizens and ninjas. Just as they noticed him, he was gone. And the chase began. Dodging shuriken and kunai falling like rain, he weaved through alleyways and across bridges. Eventually he lost them, but there were still guards posted around the main entrance to the orphanage. But Naruto had a plan. He would go past the Inuzuka complex and go through the back door to the orphanage. Only he and Nami knew about it, so he should be safe. Though it would be best if he stayed in the basement tonight, going to his room was suicide. So he raced down a few more alleys and made it in front of the massive doghouse-shaped buildings. Sometimes he would pass by over here, just to look at all the cute puppies. He often imagined Oji-san getting him his own puppy, then he wouldn't be so alone. Sure, he had Nami, but she wasn't always around. Sighing, he continued his way down the street. Naruto was so busy thinking he hadn't noticed a boy his age looking out at him through a window. Said boy was currently running down the stair to the kitchen, where his mother was making steaks. Ka-san, that puppy killer just walked in front of our house. He must be trying to kill some of the newborns just like you said. Sume looked down at his son and smiled. Good job Kiba, have a treat. Handing him a dog biscuit, she put 2 fingers in her mouth and whistled. Immediately all Inuzuka clan members and their dog partners appeared. Sume grinned and licked her tongue across her large canines. Well everyone, it looks like we get to go on a fox hunt. Cheers resonated around the room along with howls and happy barks. Naruto was power walking, he was so close to safety. All he had to do was turn this corner and that's when he saw them, loads of dogs and clan members. They had blocked off all the alleyways and had surrounded him. Terrified, he tried to back up against a wall, only to have 3 dogs run at him. Ripping flesh away from his bones, they began to tear him apart. Then all the other dogs and their companions ran in and mobbed him, tearing his clothing and giving him huge lacerations with their sharp teeth. A small white dog was the last to jump him. It gripped onto his face and started ripping at his ears and nose. Screaming in pain, the local Anbu stopped over and watched. The Inuzukas stopped, terrified that he might inform the Hokage. However, the elite nin just shrugged and said, I didn't see anything, they leapt away. Sume had a feral grin on her face and gave the signal to continue to kill the boy. The Hokage watched all this through his crystal ball and made a note to himself to strip the Anbu's rank. Sighing with tears in his eyes, he called for a squad to come with him. He just could not understand why the villagers refused to listen to reason. As the Inuzukas continued to kill the poor boy, several dogs stood on their haunches and began warning the humans that the Hokage was coming. Sume gave the order to retreat, but not before letting Kiba have his fun. Kiba called Akamaru over and prepared his new jutsu he created. Take this Gatsuga. Kiba's and Akamaru's attack hit Naruto full force and sent him flying into the air, landing with a sickening squish, probably because of all the blood he was losing. A pained Naruto saw was Sume rubbing her hand through Kiba's hair, telling him how proud of him she was. Then Kiba noticed he was still awake, and sent Akamaru to finish the job, shortly after he fell into the mercy that was unconsciousness. Just then the Hokage arrived. Along with the Anbu, all the Inuzukas were arrested. But since they could put an entire clan to death, they gave them a harsh increase on taxes. The Hokage was disappointed with the punishment, but he stayed silent as the council gave out the sentence. In reality, the tax increase was never put into effect. The tax collector kept forgetting to ask for more, or they refused to take money from the best heroes in Konoha. After regaining consciousness, Naruto found himself at the bottom of a ditch somewhere. In all the confusion of the arrest, someone must have thrown his body down, effectively hiding it and destroying whatever evidence the Hokage hoped to get. Sitting up, a bit painfully, he looked over himself. He felt his stomach feel uneasy when he looked at his arms and legs. He had hundreds of cuts, and in some places you could see his bones. Teeth marks covered his body and he was losing blood very rapidly. He tore off some of his already torn up clothes and used the pieces to stop the bleeding for the moment. Checking his pockets, he made sure he still had the medicine. Happy that he still had it, he limped home. Finally making it to the orphanage, trying to be as sneaky as possible. But that's hard when you leave a huge blood trail. He walked, if you can call it that, up to the caretaker's room. When he opened the door, he found the caretaker fake coughing on the bed, totally missing the sly smile on her face. She weakly reached her head for the bottle, but when she read the label she slapped him hard. Standing up, she grabbed his collar and shoved the label in his face. Can't you read? You bought me poison. Are you trying to kill me, demon? Shocked, Naruto did a double take on the label. It was indeed rat poison, but he was sure he had bought the right kind. He probably still had the receipt, but when he checked he found it was gone. Expecting even more pain, he shut his eyes as the caretaker's hand kept slapping him and kicking him when he was on the ground. When he finally made it to his room, though it was will alone that was keeping him alive, as he locked his door, he pulled one of the tops off one of the boxes under his bed. Inside was his homemade medical kit. It consisted of a small needle and lots of string, alcohol, which he had stolen from the Hokage's desk, and duct tape and planks of wood. There were also rips of his old shirts that he used for bandages. Gripping the needle and the string, he strung it and proceeded to give himself stitches. Using an old candle he had found in a trash can for a mouth brace, he worked himself well into the night. When he was finally done, he went to his bed to pray. Dear Kami, please watch over Nami and Oji-san and me. Thank you so much for letting me live another day, getting to meet those nice girls at the flower store, and for being bailed to help fix myself up. Please let the red light watch over me. Thank you so much, amen. With that he crawled on his bed and went to sleep. Dreaming, he remembered the first day he had felt the red light. He had been beaten very badly, near death even. Suddenly he had woken up in the night and found that his blood felt like it was on fire, but somehow, it made him feel better. Then red light shot of all his cuts and bruises, causing a fog-like aura surrounding him. All his cuts and bruises disappeared and his bones snapped back into place and mended themselves. After he felt 100% better, the fog seeped back into a small cut on the back of his hand, then it closed up. When he had asked the old man, the Hokage took it rather well, except for the part about him threatening Naruto that he would send him to Ibiki if he didn't tell him everything. The Hokage had grilled him for details, and when it was all over, Naruto had innocently asked what the red light was. He said it was Kami looking over him. Ever since his first encounter with the red light, strange things had started to happen. Like sometimes when he was getting beat up, he sometimes heard something that sounded like laughing. But the problem was there was no visible person around laughing. Sometimes he would hear a voice saying curses to humans and saying how he would kill everyone. Naruto often couldn't fall asleep, afraid that some killer was going to murder him in his sleep. When he was miserable, the voice would make it worse. It would make fun of him, calling him weak for crying and not sticking up for himself. The voice never said who it was or where it came from, but it scared him at night, and sometimes he had nightmares involving a huge fox. When he asked the Hokage about this, the old man replied that he had a mental condition called schizophrenia, where he would hear and see hallucinations and delusions. Confident with the answer he had left, but with that came the Hokage's normal routine of taking lots of antidepressants and staring at the Yondaimi's portrait. Well, tonight he was 6 years old and his birthday was over. Tomorrow he would see the Hokage about his annual birthday present, and in a few months, he would start the academy. Switching his dream to one of ramen and friends, he had a good night's sleep. Kyubi-sama, well, in a few chapters, he still has to undergo a few huge plot twists, and gain an incentive to become strong. Soul Harvester, well, I am gonna time skip Naruto after a few more chapters. I can't kill him, or Rabid Kiba fans will get their revenge. Lenhart Strife, lol, I'm glad people hate them, that's how I wanted them, poor Naruto. On with the story. Waking up, Naruto quickly noticed a card on his nightstand. Opening it up, he scanned the contents and leapt off his bed in joy, causing the caretaker to hit the ceiling with a broom, telling him to shut up or else. Grinning, he quickly hid the card under his bed, along with all of his other precious objects, such as a few pictures Oji-san took of him and Nami, and a postcard showing the Hokage monument, which he had edited to include his face. Racing down the stairs, he nearly knocked into another orphan. Speeding down the street, he neared the Hokage tower. Knocking on the door to the Hokage's office and hopping from one foot to the other with a huge grin on his face, Naruto waited for the old man. As the Hokage opened the door, he was tackled by an ecstatic Naruto. When Naruto looked up, he began laughing and pointed at the Hokage's head. On it was a small birthday hat, and he was holding an orange one for Naruto. The old man looked absolutely ridiculous, and then the Hokage joined in laughing. After a few minutes they stopped and the Hokage went over to his desk and brought out a cake. It was traditional for the two to celebrate Naruto's birthday the day after, and as well as getting a chocolate cake, sugar-free of course, no one wants a super hyper demon container. Using a Kaiden jutsu to light the candles, the old man watched as Naruto quickly made a wish. I wish I get to meet some friends. They began to eat the delicious cake the Hokage had personally requested for. After that, the secretary's voice came over the speaker. Hokage-sama, Shibi-san is here to see. The old leader pressed a button and her voice cut off. Grinning, he pulled out a poster, and on it was a 9-tailed fox. Time to play pin the tails on the biju. Grinning, Naruto rushed over, although that voice was screaming curses and demanding the old man's blood for this insult to all demons. Managing to get 6 out of 9 tails, with the other 3 he peeked, Naruto won. Soon it was time for the gifts, and Naruto was very excited. The Hokage handed him several boxes. Okay Naruto, here are some new shirts and shorts, oh and here is something you will like. Pulling out a black box, it was snatched from his hand in seconds. Ripping apart the wrapping paper, Naruto unearthed a brand new kunai. Arigato Oji-san. Trying out the new kunai, he twirled it around his finger on its loop. Suddenly it flew off and flew at the Hokage. Pinning his party hat to a nearby wall, the old man started to chuckle. Naruto began apologizing like crazy. Suddenly 3 Anbu barged into the room. Hokage-sama, are you alright? The Hokage sighed, they were late, as usual. I'm fine, but, the kunai, if it had been a real attack, I would have been dead by now. Said Sarutobi, pulling out the offending object and handing it to a very embarrassed Naruto. Besides, don't you have something better to do than watch a birthday party? But Hokage-sama, are you sure it's wise to be giving the child a weapon? Receiving a glare in return, the ninja rubbed their necks in unison, and the ninja muttered, "Gomen," and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sure that they were gone, the Hokage turned back to Naruto. Now for the best present, it's in my desk, upper left drawer. Racing over and yanking it open, Naruto pulled out a pink book. Oji-san, is this my gift? The old man coughed and grabbed the book from his hands and put it in his pocket. No, that's not it, and please don't tell Jiraiya, he'll blackmail me. But what is it? Thinking fast he replied, it's book, yes that's right. Oh, can I see it, please Oji-san? No, it's for adults. Never mind, I found another one. Wow, this looks pretty boring, I mean it is only pictures of girls. The Hokage was dying of a nosebleed after looking at what the boy was looking at. After righting himself he grabbed the second book and looked for more. Pulling out about 8 books and cramming them into his stuffed pocket. Naruto, your gift is that small box right there. Oh this one, it's so small. Half-heartedly he opened the box, expecting nothing great, after who wants a tiny present. Nothing would beat the kunai, all the other kids would be jealous. Inside he found a note card with an address on it and the number, 306. There was also a small blood stain. Aside from the card, there were 2 small keys. Oji-san, why is there blood on here? I was attacked by ninjas? Oh okay, I thought it was from a nosebleed like some of the other adults do at that shop on 3rd Street. Keeping mental note of the shop, the Hokage gestured to the keys. Do you know what these are for? No, what are they for Oji-san? Well, unfortunately, you have been kicked out of the orphanage. Tears entered Naruto's eyes and pocketed the keys. So they're for some dumpster, right? I'd guess it'd like to be in the one behind the ramen shop. The Hokage began to get tears in his eyes. It's okay Oji-san, I'll be okay, I guess. Putting a hand on the now depressed boy's shoulder, don't worry Naruto, these aren't for a dumpster, here follow me. Going over to the window that showed most of the village, the old man pointed to a rectangular building to the south. See that building over there? Yeah, but what's so special about it? Well, that's where you are going to live from now on. In a dumpster by that building? Sighing the Hokage replied, no baka, it's an apartment building, you can figure out the rest. Thinking, he finally came up with it, and with that tackled his Oji-san to the ground. Crying he hugged him and kept repeating, arigato arigato arigato. But he paused long enough to ask about Nami. Oji-san, what about Nami-chan? I can't leave her at the orphanage. Chuckling he replied, there are 2 keys aren't there? Thank you so much Oji-san. Practically breaking the sound barrier, Naruto raced back to the orphanage. Running up the stairs he bumped into a pissed-off caretaker. Demon brat, how dare you knock me over? I will make you kicked out of here. Grinning, Naruto stuck his tongue out at her and went into his room. Locking the door, he gathered everything up, like his few clothes and treasures. He didn't forget to make sure he packed everything, because if he left something, it would be destroyed. The caretaker was angry and was starting to beat at the door. He paled and worked faster. Wrapping everything up in his bedsheet, he snuck out the window and climbed down the storm drain. He came back through the kitchen window and could hear her screaming at his room. Open this damn door demon brat, so I can skin you alive. Snickering at her back, he went over to the girls' rooms. The girls' rooms were different. You had to pass those several doors just to get to there, because apparently some guys thought it was okay to rape the innocent orphans. It had happened a few times in the past, and sometimes the kidnappers came and took children away, especially the story of the snake monster. There was said to be some snaky guy who went into orphanages and took children away, and none of them were ever seen again. It still scared Naruto, but their caretaker acted like she could care less. She would even put signs on his door saying to kill him or at least take him away. Knocking on the door to the girls' rooms, one of the older orphans opened it. Tenten looked down at the small blonde and sneered. She, like almost all the others, had been brainwashed by the caretaker into hating him as well. It seemed hatred was infectious. "What do you want? Anyo, is Nami there? Just go away, she's not here. Demo, she's always here at 3. Too bad, so sad, now go away." With that she tried to shut the door in his face. "Oh, okay, arigato." Suddenly a high-pitched squeal of "Naruto-kun" came from behind Tenten. Appearing in the doorway was Nami, who was holding her favorite teddy bear. She tackled him to the ground, but unfortunately, his new kunai fell out of his pocket. Tenten, who had just recovered from the squeal, noticed it and snatched it from the ground. "Thanks brat, I think I'll add this to my collection." Jumping up from the ground he tried to get it back, but she just held her hand up. He was still very short. "Oh come on, give it back please." Sneering she slapped him and closed the door. Hearing it lock, Naruto sighed. There was no way of getting it now. Even if he did break in, he would be beaten for being a pervert. It had happened to one of the other boys. He was still sucking food though a straw. Turning his attention back to Nami, he told her the news. "Nami, guess what?" "What? We got our own apartment." It took Nami a few seconds to get it thought her head what he was saying. Then she just stood there shocked. But after a few seconds she let out the loudest squeal imaginable. Elsewhere, Orochimaru was having trouble making up a name for his new village. He was stumped, but then he heard an ear-splitting sound. The Hidden Sound Village, I like it. Zabuza was escorting the Mizukage to one of his meetings. Leaping through the trees with a few of the other swordsmen. A sudden noise made him lose his balance and brought his sword on a collision course with the cage. Almost beheading the poor man, everyone stared at him when they regained their balance. "Tracer, you almost killed the cage." With that he was run out of town. Haku's father was walking home from work one day when he heard a strange noise. It sounded like a young girl, Haku. Racing home, he came just in time to witness his daughter using her water bloodline to float a glob of water. Stunned, he stood there gawking, until fury at his wife for lying to him overcame him. Storing away he banged on the doors to a few of his drinking buddies. A struggling Hinata was trying to get away from the Kumo nin carrying her. Her father was desperately trying to catch up with the ninja, but he was just too fast. Suddenly a blasting noise sent the man to drop Hinata and grab his ears in pain. Completely focused, Hiyashi jukened the man in the back, killing him instantly. Unwrapping his daughter she sneered at her inability to defend herself. A young Lee was training out in the forest, jumping rope. Dead tired, only his will kept going on. 456, 457, 458, 459, 460. Suddenly a noise startled him and he fell down. Guide chose then to come out and help build up the boy's confidence. Tsunade was rolling the dice in her hand. All she had to do to win was roll a perfect 12, getting ready to cast them. A squeal from somewhere far off gave her a jolt and she accidentally released the die. One ended up a 6, but the other was still rolling. When it finally stopped, it ended up a 5. The other players snickered and one lucky guy raked in thousands. Screaming words that would make Tayuya blush. Shizune just sighed, read a hand though her hair. Jiraiya was peeping in some random hot spring. Drooling, he watched as several busty teenagers played water games with each other. Suddenly a noise made him fall out of his tree and splash into the lake below. Thinking fast he pulled a henge and transformed into a young girl. Hee sorry, everyone. Rubbing the back of her neck he grinned towards the other girls. "I'm so good, I gotta do this more often." Suddenly all the notes of research fell out of the tree and landed right in front of the girls. Picking up a sheet one of the girls blushed after reading a few lines. That's when she saw the header, Icha Paradise Volume 27. "You write this smut? Do you realize how many perverts you have created?" With that the other girls began to beat up the poor defenseless Jiraiya. In Suna, a lone boy was just about to make friends with a boy whose parents were traitors. Just about to shake his hand, a noise suddenly caused the boy to grab his ears in pain and run away. His eye twitching, a very angry Gaara howled into the sky. Back in Konoha, Nami had finally stopped squealing. Poor Naruto had gotten the worst of it. He had been right next to her, though after a few seconds he put a finger into his ear and pulled out a glob of wax, which had effectively blocked the majority of the sound. The voice in his head was crying and sobbing about its ears and killing a certain little girl. Naruto found Nami almost physically attached to him in a super tight hug. It was crushing his ribs and it hurt a lot. Nami, you are crushing me? Oh, sorry Naruto-kun. Handing her one of the keys, she pocketed it quickly. After she had told him that she had no personal items she would miss, they left to find their new home. As they arrived at the apartment building, the owner looked at the little boy. What do you brats want? The Hokage said that he had gotten us an apartment here. I didn't know he got it for a little girl and a demon. Suddenly a flow of white robes appeared behind the children. The Hokage looked into the apartment owner's eyes as he asked, "Is there a problem with letting 2 children live here? I also believe you broke a law by just saying that comment to the boy." The man's eyes widened at fear as he realized the old man was right. Please forgive me Hokage-sama. They can stay here for free. Yeah, they can stay for free." The old man grinned. "I thought you would see it my way, and I will be watching everything that happens to him personally." The paled man nodded vigorously. Nodding, the Hokage turned his attention to the children. "I would suggest getting some groceries once you are set in. Here is some money to buy extra furniture and supplies, though the room already has all the essentials, like beds and a fridge and an oven." "Well, I must be off. Goodbye." The old man left the children to the sweating owner, who escorted them to their room. As the pair walked inside, she launched herself at the window bed. Naruto groaned. He wanted the window bed. "Okay, well at least the place has furniture, but we still need to stock the fridge." "You are just going to buy ramen?" "No, I wouldn't." Nami raised an eyebrow at this. "Okay, so I would, but I would get you stuff too." "Okay, here let me write a list for all the food to get." Naruto was walking down the street, headed to the market. Checking his pocket to make sure he had the money in the list, he passed by his favorite ramen shop, Ichiraku's. Now there were several reasons to his infatuation towards the noodles. The first was because the caretaker at the orphanage would only buy him the cheapest food possible. Sometimes she would just give him a bag of potato chips to last a few days. But his favorite was when she brought home the free sample instant ramen cups. It was delicious. After a while the caretaker learned this and began buying it in surplus, not because she wanted him to be fed, but because it had no nutrition whatsoever. So it had ended up stunting his growth, something the caretaker often boasted to her friends. The second reason was that the stuff was the cheapest kind of meat he could get. He always had a craving for the stuff, most likely a side effect from having a huge carnivorous fox living in your stomach. So he would always try to get as much as he could. It made the voice happy for some reason. So, deciding to go in and get a few bowls, he ended up eating 15 extra large bowls and left the store. Heading over to the market, he picked up all the items on the list: food, medical supplies, toilet paper, some silverware, candy. They were still kids of course, and some new clothes. Satisfied, he left for the apartment. As he was walking home, he bumped into a much older boy. He seemed normal, except that the boy was covered in blood. Apologizing, he noticed the blood and paled. He thought that the blood was the boy's and was seriously hurt, and he dropped his bags and looked inside until he found his medical supplies. The boy hadn't even said one word, but just stared at the blonde. Pulling out the medical kit, he offered it to the other boy, who just looked at it, then smashed it with his bare fist. Turning his attention back to the blonde, he grabbed his forearm and threw him into a nearby wall. Gasping for breath, he saw the boy disappear, only to appear in front of him, sending punches to his gut. Coughing up blood, he watched as the older boy let him fall to his knees, only to get kicked in the ribs. Out of breath, he watched as the other boy threw several shuriken, stabbing in his arms and legs, tearing apart important muscles for movement. Then Itachi grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and punched him hard in the cheek. As Naruto was sailing in the air, Itachi appeared above him and sent a kick that ground him into the ground, making a small dent. As Naruto attempted to lift himself up, he felt the older boy grabbing his arm and launching him in the air. As he was falling down, Itachi was making hand signs. When he was in range, Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Wikipedia spellings for jutsus. Exhaling, a huge fireball was created and was sent straight at the blonde. His clothes erupted in flame and a chilling scream was heard by people in nearby buildings. As he was left smoldering on the ground, various burns covering his body, Itachi held him up by the collar once again and looked into his eyes. Barely conscious, Naruto saw that the boy had strange eyes, then they started to twirl. A second later he blinked, and when he opened his eyes, he found he was in the same street, but everything was either black or red. Suddenly he felt something go through him, and cringing in pain, he noticed a half of a katana rammed through his stomach. The older boy appeared behind him and began laughing at his pain. "You are in my world now, and for the next 72 hours, you will be killed in many painful ways. My personal favorite is being cut up into tiny pieces, or impaled by hundreds of swords," moving the sword still inside left and right to emphasize his point. "Goodbye, demon." Of course Itachi was far from stupid enough to think the boy was the demon, but he was saying this to see the boy's reaction, which was worth it. His face scrunched up and tears began falling as he was burned by an acid puddle below him. Screaming in pain, Itachi went back to reality, as he watched the boy's blank face fall down to the ground. To finish the job he began forming hand seals, Kaden, Karyu Enden. A huge dragon made of fire exploded from Itachi's mouth. Spinning and twirling, it finally hit the poor boy full force, burning off his arms and legs and nearly killing him. The only reason he was still alive was that the Kyuubi was working overtime, trying to keep the badly burned boy alive. Itachi sneered and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Instantly 20 Anbu and the Hokage appeared and saw a near-lifeless Naruto fall to the ground. The old man rushed over and ordered for medic ninjas. In all the confusion, Naruto was still in the Tsukuyomi world. All he could see was blue, nothing but blue. He was floating around and relaxing. This was his dream, he could do anything he wanted. Imagining a giant ramen bowl, one instantly appeared, getting ready to dive in. Suddenly a giant red tail grabbed him by his waist. He was pulled around to see a giant fox. The fox grinned and showed off its huge teeth. It looked angry. Well, if the snarling wasn't any clue. Suddenly the tail holding him squeezed hard, it was crushing him. Struggling for air, he tried to pull himself out of its grasp, but it was impossible, it was too powerful. The blue background started to turn black. Another tail began crushing him as well. Soon they were breaking every bone in his body and with his screams, and the monster only laughed more. Its laugh was painful to its ears, but he couldn't do anything about it. The fox stopped laughing and just grinned. The background was now entirely black, entirely devoid of life, and red flames had risen. The fox was still crushing him and he heard his ribs snap one by one by one. His lungs were killing him, he couldn't breathe. The fox opened its mouth and the tails threw him into its maw. Screaming, he could only watch as he was tossed in. He was falling down a bottomless pit, and all he could see was more and more red flames. Soon it became nothing but red. Then he fell onto some kind of platform. Absolutely terrified, he could only watch as 9 tails snaked their way closer to him. He tried to get away, but as he got closer to the edge, he saw the platform was above a pit of fire. As he turned back, he watched a huge fox head appear from the opposite edge, the tails still snaking slowly towards him. He was trapped. The first tail sprang out and attached itself to one of his arms, curling around it so the limb was immobile. 2 more caught his right leg, immobilizing it like his arm. Soon he had 1 tail on each arm, and 2 on each of his legs. 2 more were wrapped around his torso and waist. The last tail just spiraled in front of him, the fox grinning an evil grin. "You are so pathetic." The scared young boy was desperately trying to get away, but the tails wouldn't budge. "Are you scared? Good." Naruto was crying now. Why wouldn't this dream end? Because it's not a dream. What? This wasn't a dream. He had to get out of here. "You can't escape, you can never escape." Panicking, he was pleading with whatever god out there to help him. Ha ha ha. You are so weak, you can't even help yourself. Suddenly the red flames were pierced by a blue light, a door was created. Rays of blue light shone on the fox's tails as they receded and Naruto sprinted for the door. A huge angry fox at his heels. Just as he was about to escape, a tail grabbed onto his leg and pulled him back in. The blue light had disappeared, he had no hope of getting out. The fox grinned and brought a claw down, ready to smash him, Just as it was about to hit him, he closed his eyes. Sweating hard, he shot upright. Breathing heavy, he looked around. The fox was nowhere to be seen. He realized he was in the hospital. All the lights were off. The only thing illuminating the room was the window, letting pale moon rays in. He relaxed and closed his eyes, and when he opened them, nothing was there. Just the same electronic beep from some of the machines in the room. He turned his head around and looked to see if the Hokage was in his usual chair. He wasn't. He knew it was late and the geezer probably needed some sleep. He turned his head to the other side of the room, but on one of the chairs was a fox. It was sitting there staring at him, but then it showed off its teeth and leapt at him. Right before its mouth bit down on his head, he blacked out. For the second time, he woke up and realized he was in the hospital. Struggling to get out of the bed, he found he was strapped down. He couldn't feel his arms or legs, and he was surrounded by people in white. They were moving quickly and watching machines, and in the corner he saw the Hokage talk to one of the people in white. His vision was still blurry, but he was terrified. Looking everywhere, he tried to find the fox, but it was nowhere to be seen. He felt a lot safer around all the other people, but he still was scared. The medics noticed he was conscious and even more activity started. As he still struggled to get up, he kept thinking about the fox. "I am right here. H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A." Now trying his best, he tried to get off the bed, screaming about foxes. Everyone paled and sped up their work. It was chaos. In his head, the fox just kept laughing. "Sir, the boy's arms and legs are starting to give off its chakra. We think it's attempting repair the boy." "Arigato. Now can I see him?" "Yes, but be careful. We fear the fox is up to something." "All right." With that, the old man walked over to the poor boy's side. "Naruto, how do you feel?" "Oji-san, there was this big fox and it kept trying to kill me. I think it's the voice." Knowing that the child was in no condition to learn the bombshell that was the Kyuubi, he had no other choice but to lie. "Naruto, relax, remember, none of it is real. But it hurt, it crushed me. It's just all in your head, just relax, it can't hurt you." Demo, it seems so real." "Naruto, look at me, none of it is real. I wonder why the demon hasn't told him yet. The Kyuubi had its own reasons. If it told the boy, there is the possibility he might become depressed and choose suicide. The Kyuubi had no intent on dying in such a cowardly way. Another is that when the boy was conscious of the fox, he might catch on that the fox was vulnerable." "Okay, Oji-san, you are right, it was, all, in, my, head?" With that, the boy fell asleep. Soon after he did, red chakra came out of the scars on the stumps where his arms and legs used to be. All the medics stopped what they were doing and watched as the chakra began healing him. His arms began to grow, until finally, he had successfully regenerated all his lost limbs. Then the chakra began to heal all of his burns and cuts. Some of the medics began taking notes, fascinated as the chakra was doing the impossible. Soon, he was completely healed, and the chakra seeped back into one last cut, that soon sealed up. "Hokage-sama, do you have any idea why the Kyuubi would do this to the boy?" "I would guess that because of Itachi's attack. Naruto's consciousness was momentarily sent into the fox's cage. It was a sheer miracle that the seal held and Naruto was able to get out. Now that Naruto is back in control, he shouldn't experience those nightmares again, but regardless, I want him to visit me in a week to see if he any permanent damage." "Hi Hokage-sama." His head hurt a lot, and his vision was blurry. He remembered he was still in the hospital, and heard the voice again, but smiled knowing that none of it was real, no matter how scary. The Hokage told him it wasn't real, and why would the old man lie? Turning his head, he saw the Hokage was sleeping in his favorite chair, and sleeping on his shoulder was Nami. Naruto quickly called to the old man, who due to his ninja senses woke up immediately. Smiling at the boy, the Sarutobi nudged the little girl, who after a few seconds woke up. Naruto, flinging herself at the poor boy, whose body was still extremely sore, gave him a bone-crushing hug. The Hokage's sweat dropped as he watched the children, and soon Naruto was chasing her down the hall spouting threats all the way, leaving the old man to himself. He figured they would be fine by themselves, and then pulled out his little pink book, and soon a blush adorned his face. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.